Hello YouTube, this is Christian coming to you with another knife review. This time on the table it's a Wii Elementum. So I'm sure you all know fairly well the CVV Elementum, and this is the premium version. I had a number of varieties of this particular knife from Wii, mostly because I've been kind of a fan of the design, of the simplistic look of the CVV Elementum, and when we announced that they are going to come out with a premium version, and when it eventually came out, it was straight away a knife I wanted to have, because the Elementum from CVV was such a great starting point anyways, in terms of having a relatively neutral, nice EDC compact size knife. And what always was a point of contemplation for me with the CVV Elementum was the fact that, well, my Kata and G10, Damascus and D2 weren't necessarily my first choices in terms of plate material or scale material, especially not if it's shadow boxed. That being said, all of that in the CVV Elementum turns out to be beautifully functional and good, and it just makes a great pocket knife. So it is relatively clear and straightforward to say, hey, look, this is such a neutral design that is fitting for many occasions. So you have a knife design that works in an office environment, that works in a suit environment. If you want to carry a knife, it's not necessarily looking out of place if you open a package if you're wearing a suit. It is nice functional for other EDC tasks. So overall, a very good choice, and it's cheap. And so for a lot of people, I suppose, the cheap character of it is not necessarily something that is attracting, because people who pride themselves in quality items, they don't necessarily look for cheap. And so having something that reflects a little bit more quality is appreciated. And so ultimately, if you're CVV or Wii, which is pretty much a company with us, or Wii is a mother company with CVV being a subsidiary for cheaper knives, it makes a lot of sense to take it a notch up and actually transform the CVV Elementum into more premium version, if you like. So, and that's what's on the table right here. It's the same overall form factor, more or less. I'll get to that later on. But it's a 2.96 inch blade, and in this case they went for frame lock as opposed to a liner lock. So all of that, in this case this is a blue titanium with a stone wash finish. It's a grayish kind of blade, so I suppose they must have put a PVD coating or a diamond-like coating on that and then stone washed it. Overall, I found that to be very attractive, and overall I like the material choices a lot. I also love the fact that they went with titanium stone washed. That's great. I love the look. I love the aged character that it kind of emits, if you want to put it this way. The Wii logo on the pivot, I could have done without, but other than that, it's alright. It's not too much, and it's a rather subtle logo anyways. And what you get ultimately is a really, at the beginning, perhaps a bit of a stiffer flipping action, but Wii is known, and every Wii knife that I handled over time just started out a little bit on the stiffer side, and it breaks in usually very, very nicely into a smooth and kind of not light action, but yeah, a kind of almost a hydraulic action. I haven't used this knife enough to actually be saying this is the case for this particular knife yet, and I doubt that I will be, but we get to that later on. So on the back side you can see you get titanium hardware, so that little collet around your pivot screw there, all your screws there. They're anodized titanium in blue, with T8 on all of the critical ones and T6 on the pocket clip screws. The pocket clip also blends in terms of color and material into the rest of the color scheme, because it's a titanium pocket clip, and the milling for the frame lock is happening on outside. So as far as everything else is concerned for your actual frame lock, you can see that is a pretty perfect starting point for frame lock, with a hardened insert and a solid carbide, a ceramic detent. So also that knife runs on ceramic bearings. So all of that is nicely done. It's overall a good look, and I kind of have to say it is kind of a premium. It has a premium feel to it as opposed to the standard CVV Elementum, mostly because there's a certain heft to it. There's a weight to it, and despite the relatively thin blade, you have rather chunky titanium scales on it. So deployment is fine. In terms of closing the knife, at the moment, as you can see, it's not full shut by any means, and even shaking it will hardly convince it to go down. But I wouldn't make too much of that for an out-of-the-box knife, because it's just plain hasn't had time to settle in, and all the little tracks that your bearings will create on the face of the plate haven't been smoothened out yet. So it would need time to break in before it becomes a full shut action. And even in this particular case, and even loosening the pivot point, loosening the pivot screw, won't help it all too much. And the reason is that for such a light plate, they decided to go with a really large amount of lock bar pressure. So this is ultimately, you can see if I'm holding it back, it kind of likes to rotate freely, but there's an awful lot of lock bar pressure sitting on the side of the plate when you're trying to close it, which stops it from being full shut, because it's just pushing too hard on the plate in this particular case. So here's a number of thoughts, and I have to say I tried two. I had a black one before, also stone-washed finish, the black blade and black scales. I ended up selling it because I was unsatisfied with it, and I thought, maybe I had a dud, and that itch came up again and said, I've got Elementums, but really I'm not carrying them that much. Mostly also because it's D2, and D2 is a fine steel, but I live close to the ocean, in an area where we have relatively high humidity, saturated with seawater air, and so D2 isn't my preferred choice. So this was a logical choice, and also I like to have my icons, or those very iconic designs. I usually like to have them in a premium material. Now, they missed so many opportunities on this particular knife. The Elementum from CVV was a huge success in so many ways, and I can hardly imagine any knife out there that would have been sold more than the CVV Elementum. And the formula seemed to be really quite straightforward and simple. You take a very good design, very nice aesthetic, and you just transfer it to more premium materials. And I find this is actually a premium example that this doesn't always work. And I feel really it's a bit of a letdown. And okay, it's perhaps because the expectations for a premium knife are higher. The bar sits higher. And it's not just a matter of taking the stainless steel liners out of the equation in the micarta and throw some titanium in and remove the D2 plate, which is pretty much a budget steel, and slap a 20 CV plate on, it's not that simple. And you can see clearly right here in front of you how it is not. And the reason is, look at this. I mean, right here, you've got a premium knife, or a knife that is supposed to be at a premium level, and then they put a pocket clip on, and they don't even bother to create a pocket for your pocket clip, so at least you would have a nice sliding action in and out of your pocket without that step in it. And there's enough meat in the material to actually be going down and actually make it flush with the scale. No, it was too much work. Okay, that's a bit of a letdown, but okay, let's carry on. You can always fit an aftermarket pocket clip. What you can't do is you can't, at least most of the people I know who don't have a mill at home, they're not going to pocket that titanium scale to get that pocket clip flush. So that's not going to happen. And that's why. I mean, you had the opportunity, you could have looked at all the things that were not perfect on the CVV Elementum and actually take it up a notch, take it to the next level. No, we're just slapping it on straight onto the scale, right? And the next thing is, why would you change the position of the pocket clip to a level where it actually sits higher than your scales? I mean, this is just atrocious. This is an eyesore. You know, in my wildest dreams, I wouldn't have imagined that you take a pocket clip higher for whatever reason. But look at that. Right? So this is such a clean aesthetic. This is just such a clean looking knife. And then you go and you take that pocket clip over the edge. Why? So that we have ultra deep carry? Is that what we call it? I don't know. Not needed. We don't need this. Just get it down a notch. Yeah, make it look pretty. I mean, that's part of the equation. So that's a missed opportunity right there. Right? And then the next thing is, yeah, look, we understand the CVV, it was a liner lock, it had scales screwed on, all fine. But why do we have to replicate the lanyard hole? Why do we have to design it in such a way that it mimics the same layup? Right? We could have just kept this solid. It would have looked really neat. It would have looked really nice. And God forbid, if you wanted to actually make it an upgrade, because you're also charging considerably more money for this particular knife, why don't you go and actually make it a backspacer and integrate your lanyard hole into that one? That would have been an improvement, right? So here's another missed opportunity to say, hey, look, we can do better than this, because this looks like a cast piece of steel, you know, like, really? Yeah, we have a solid titanium scale there, right? Why do we have to pretend it needs to look like a liner lock? Well, I don't get it. But okay, let's drop this one. The next thing is, and I knew it. I mean, I knew it before I bought this knife. But one of the great features of the CVV Elementum was its beautiful grind at a really affordable price. You got that beautiful, deep, hollow grind that makes it such a great slicer. And you're getting the premium version, and it's in 20 CV. And you get a flat grind. Why would you want a flat grind? I mean, this is not a heavy duty thing. This is an EDC knife for light tasks. Yeah, you want edge retention, you're gonna maybe do some cardboard with it, some light cutting tasks. But why do we have to do without that hollow grind? Why do we have to go with a flat grind? Is it because we have 20 CV as a plate steel in a relatively thin plate stock? Yeah, okay, I mean, I get it, it could be. I mean, if you take plate stock that thin and you put a hollow grind on it, then I can see how this edge down here is going to be really, really sensible to chipping. Yeah, okay, point taken. But then go with SV35 or go with Magnacut. Magnacut would be a great steel for this particular knife. A great steel for this particular knife, right? Maybe not as good in terms of edge retention as 20CV. Okay, maybe a tiny bit below, but you get great toughness. And if you go with thin plate stock, yeah, that makes sense, right? Okay, another missed opportunity if you ask me. So the next thing, and this has to do also with the thin plate stock. This frame lock is a pain. It's really, really hard. I mean, I can get a little bit of meat in, but there's hardly any. If you look at that, you see there's hardly any room to engage with the actual frame down there. I mean, they're actually textured. They're milled. They went through the trouble of actually milling this chamfered edge here to give you better access to that lock bar. But that must have been a hobbit or a dwarf with tiny fingers operating that thing. I mean, there's hardly any space in between the scales as it is. There's very, very little. It's such a thin blade, right? And then you're trying to squeeze in, and that lock bar, because it's a frame lock, is hard. It's hard to push. I'm hurting my thumb trying to push that over. Yeah. And well, you know, with a liner lock, sure, no problem. You just have a, I don't know, 1 millimeter, 1.2 millimeter thick liner that you push over quite easily, and you don't need the same amount of space in between the scales. All makes sense. But has anybody tried this before they send it out, before they approve the design? You know, you can just recess it a little bit more on this side. Give decent access to that frame lock. It's harder to push, guys. It's really harder to push, especially in a small knife. So here's another letdown, really. And look, this is a beautiful knife. There's no doubt about it. I love the looks of it. I'm really feeling there's two eyesores about it that look better on the cheaper knife, right? I mean, if you have the color contrast of a micarta scale, and then you have a silverish stainless liner sitting there with your lanyard hole, that kind of makes for an interesting detail. But this looks just plain unfinished. Yeah, you have a pocket clip that just sits over the contour of your knife. I mean, I haven't seen that one before. So why do it? I don't know. I mean, this is really, I'm I'm going out on a rant here. But look, what I'm saying is, it's a beautiful knife. But what I'm disappointed in is the fact that they had the opportunity to actually turn this into a premium product and ergonomically improve on it. And as far as ergonomics is concerned, I prefer the CVV version of it. Right? So, you know, if you go out and get some Flytanium scales for your CVV Elementum, and if you can live with D2, you will have ergonomically a better knife. Right? And you have the bling. So, yeah, that's a bit of a bummer. And these are not necessarily overly cheap either. I mean, you know, what do you pay? Between 120 and 150? That's not a cheap knife for a knife that is small and compact, right? So they could have done a bit more on this one. Okay, so this is just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. But people compare and complain about, let's say, a giant mouse Ace Grant. right? So you take, let's say, the Ace Grand, and people say, oh, look, this kind of side of the scale, it could be a little bit more generous to give you better access to your lock bar. But this is luxurious in terms of the space you get. It is not the most comfortable, I give you that. But compared to the Elementum, it's a piece of cake. It is. So this one is, I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to open that screw here, get to the hardened insert, take it out, and then just, you know, bend your frame lock over a little bit. But we shouldn't be, you know, we shouldn't have to do this. Not on a knife like that from a premium manufacturer like we. Right? This is just too much. So if you can overcome these little things that I'm ranting about, if you say, yeah, Christian, you got a few points there, but it's still looking great. I wouldn't enter into that argument, because it is looking great, right? It is a great knife, a great design. Absolutely. The steel 20 CV with the flat grind is going to be functional. It is going to slice nicely. Absolutely. No doubt about it. You can get an aftermarket pocket clip for it. You can solve it if it bothers you. It's just a me thing. I'm bothered by it, especially given the price tag. And other than that, it works as well as the CVV Elementum, with the exception of the frame lock. Right? So, yeah, look, it is a great knife, but in my honest opinion, for that kind of money, you can get better out there. Unless you're actually in love with that design, or you feel like it has to be part of your collection. Like, that is one of the prime reasons I found I had to get it. Really something that you don't want to miss out in your collection. Then yeah, but with a caveat, and that caveat is, hey, they could have done better. And that is something that is bothering me a little bit. Alright, so that's just my 2 cents. You make of it what you will, and I wish you a good time, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, or the rest of your day, as the case might be. Alright, you have a good one. Bye bye.